It's to the end of the day, and we have a special guest here, Joe DeSena. Thank you for being here, Joe. Really appreciate the time. So Joe's founded the famous Spartan Race, and some other things we'll get into, but I'd like to kind of start back at the start and hear your story about the Mobsters to Monks story.
Yeah. So grew up in Queens and Howard Beach. If anybody's seen the movie Goodfellas, I grew up right in the center of that. You don't choose your parents. You don't choose where to grow up, and I certainly didn't. But most people went to jail or still in jail, even back from the 1970s, or died. And the way of life though was hustling and getting stuff. They were up early. They got stuff done, and obviously there were people running legitimate businesses. The one common thread amongst everybody there was they were very particular. They were very careful on the words they chose, and they were detail-oriented around everything they did. They were up early. They hustled. My mom makes a left turn. She walks into a health food store. This is probably mid-'70s, and there is an Indian in the back of the room that just flew in from India, and he's a yogi, and he's a vegan. And she starts talking to him like any of us would walking into a health food store where we're looking to learn about supplements or holistic approaches. And she goes hook, line, and sinker from the life we were in and the neighborhood we're in into this new direction. And so my parents get divorced. And before you know it, there are, in my mother's house where we're living, there are monks chanting, there's yoga being taught, there's pictures of and I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, just there's pictures of Indians with afros and stuff on the walls in the house, and it's hard to explain in an Italian neighborhood where everybody's eating raviolis and cannolis and pizza what this is that's going on. And so she's ridiculed, and my sister and I are not even buying into it. She's a crazy person. And so it's really funny. Last night I was out with a very high-level executive I had to grab a dinner with, and this executive was talking about she had just gone to India on a retreat, a 7-day retreat, and she was going through all these things she learned. And I said, wow, it's 2017. In the 1970s, everything she's talking about, my mother was preaching, and we all said she was nuts.
Right.
So, so Mobsters to monks.
So a bit more about that Mobsters beginning. That's where you start. I mean, you already sort of said about the hustling and that you really bought into that and started getting practice in that, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, wherever you live as a young person, you find something to idolize. And so I found, like everybody did, these organized crime figures where they made money, they had respect, and so we wanted to be like them. And then eventually my mother changed that direction, and I actually wanted to get into health and wellness and change people's lives. But and that's probably because I saw a lot of people get killed and go to jail. But otherwise, that was the direction that if you had to choose as an 8-year-old, you probably weren't looking to wear a robe. You were looking to wear a suit and have a Cadillac, right?
Right. So fast forwarding a little while, you start getting into endurance things,
well, so my first business, I cleaned swimming pools, and if a couple of lessons for all of us to take away here is my first customer was the head of an organized crime family. And he said, on time is late, so I had to show up early. He said, even though I'm paying you $35 to clean the pool, you need to go above and beyond. I want you straightening up all the lawn furniture. I want you to clean my shed if the windows are dirty. And so I always went above and beyond. And he said, you gotta show that you love what you're doing, because if we're gonna let you in our backyards. And boy, those were lessons from the most unlikely person, but they really stuck with me through life. So anyway, that business became a pretty big business, and it got into construction. And so really my first endurance events were running a business, because whether it was raining, snowing, I felt like a mailman. It doesn't matter. You have to be out there and doing your job.
Right. So I think if you ever Google Joe DeSena and sort of ignore the Spartan part, you see all of these, Joe DeSena is crazy because he did this crazy thing, whether it's running the Iditarod instead of using dogs, or running 3 endurance races in a week and going to a wedding in between.
I just didn't have the money for dogs. I would have rather have dogs. I would have taken anything, a camel, anything.
So a lot of, I mean, when people are using the word crazy, they're talking about sort of your perseverance and your ability to persevere. So can you talk a bit about where you sort of started with that, but where does that come from? And
well, I think it comes from 2 places, and they're both going to sound ridiculous to the audience. One place is you're sitting in this neighborhood where people are getting killed and going to jail, and you're literally playing a tape in your head that says, could I do the time? Because everybody goes to jail, right? Could I do 10 years? Could I do 20 years? And so so a hike for 8 days through the snow in Alaska, like compared to 10 years, and that's a vacation. Right? So that's that side of it. And then my mother would fast for 10, 20, 30 days, right? So she had that extreme personality also on the other side in a healthy, possibly healthy way. Introduced my sister and I to a 3,000-mile run in Queens, New York, around a 1-mile loop, Transcendence Run. And so you see that stuff as a young person, and you know, everything in life, in my opinion, when you're considering being successful at something or not, whether it's a mom, a monk, whatever, mechanic, comes down to your frame of reference, right? So what do you know in your mind is normal? If you grew up in Siberia and you only took cold showers, and I told you, hey, we have to work 20 hours today, no big deal. Not a cold shower, right? Not growing up, not in Siberia. But if you grew up in a really plush household and you lived in a bubble, you flip out. You flip out when there's not Wi-Fi on the airplane. You flip out. And so I manufacture adversity. I just did it outside. I did a bunch of burpees, right? I make myself suffer because I don't. Thankfully, I don't have to suffer in my everyday life, right? I live in a bubble like we all do, and so I manufacture some adversity so that when the crappy stuff comes my way, and it comes at all of us, it's no big deal. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so has that always been the case? Because again, the sort of the big stories about you are these long races, these 6-day through Alaska. Did it start with that, and then you're doing things like making a target of burpees per day, or was that always part of it?
I'll tell you what, hardest thing I've ever done in my life is run a business. Alaska was tough, Canada was tough, Switzerland was tough. I'm lucky enough to race all over the world and do crazy things. There's lots of people crazier, but running a business is tough because when you're under stress and duress, the body can handle that really well if you've got a physical response. And when you're running a business, you don't necessarily have a physical response. You've got stress all day, every day, it doesn't stop. You don't necessarily have a physical response, right? We run from a tiger. Well, I got tigers coming at me every day. I can't run. I got to deal with payroll and all the BS that comes along running a business.
Right. So this idea of kind of practicing worst case scenarios and making yourself miserable so the rest of the day looks good, that sounds a lot like the Stoic philosophers. Is that some of where that came from as well, or is it purely, hey, I experienced this?
I wish I was smarter. I didn't do very well in school. I didn't even know what a philosopher was. I found out about Stoicism and everything later in life, and obviously it has big application to what we do at Spartan. But when I live in Japan now, and when I stumbled upon the monks in Kyoto, up in Mount High, and Dan probably knows I'm saying that wrong, I was blown away because I said, this is me. I should live here. I'm a monk, I guess, and I'm Japanese because. So when you say, where did it come from? I don't know where it came. But it's exactly on target for what Stoics believed. It's exactly on target for what the monks in Japan believed. And it's, look, this is not new stuff. This is thousands of years old. And the idea, Seneca, right? You name them, they would go out and live like a homeless person for a day or two to appreciate what they had. The great samurai would burn everything in their mind at night before going to bed so that when they woke up in the morning, they appreciated everything they had.
Yeah, and I think it's increasingly difficult to get people to accept this idea, right? Because we are so comfortable in Western world. So I see.
I'm selling a very difficult product to sell. I am not selling comfort, and I'm not selling something that's easy.
Right. I saw a video of you recently traveling, carrying a kettlebell. So what are some other practical things like that this audience could start doing some of this?
Look, everything, when we talk about Manufacturingversity, obviously you want to do things that are healthy, right? They suck, but they're healthy, right? Burpees, they never get better. Never get better. There's no, people say, oh, well, you do so many of them. Are they eat? No, every day they suck. And cold showers always suck. Running sucks. Right? There's very few people that really like to run. And so I think by definition, if you're going to manufacture some adversity, you're going to change your frame of reference, which is like putting goggles on and seeing the world differently, it's got to suck. And it's got to be healthy. So yeah, burpees, cold shower, and run. Pull-ups suck. Everything sucks.
So can you give the audience just a brief introduction to Spartan Race, what actually happens? I saw there was a big one in Australia a couple of days ago. What is it?
So let's just go back. So in 2000, year 2000, I said, I'm an entrepreneur, and I had been racing all over the world. I'm going to start putting on events. And so the first event I put on was 350 miles long. It was like, there was like a 20-mile swim in it. It was insane. And actually, if you want, I'll take a left turn here and tell you a funny story. That race took 8 days. On the 8th day, when they were cracking the champagne open and the race was over, I was told that we lost somebody. And I said, well, when did we lose this person? And they said, oh, well, about 8 days ago. And I said, well, how are you just telling me now? And they said, well, they were setting up the ropes before the start of the race, and it was one of our men had fallen on rocks, cut his leg, and needed stitches. And so the climbing crew suggested that he just go get stitched up, go back to the main island, and that they didn't need him anymore because he would have been a hindrance because he had stitches. That was the last time they saw him 8 days earlier. So my dad, he was alive, happened to be down there in year 2000, and he says, look, I don't know if down here in the British Virgin Islands they consider negligence criminal, so you've got to be really careful about, obviously we got to find the guy, but you got to be careful about how we tackle this. So huge storm has rolling in, the race is over, everybody's having a party, and I've got this thing weighing on my shoulder that we lost a guy 8 days ago. So I get the Coast Guard involved, they roll out the maps. You can visualize the storm rolling in on these maps, and they're trying to figure it out, who saw him last, where is he? They triangulate, they jump in their helicopters, and they go. They found him 150 miles away. He had drifted in a dinghy, landed on Little Tobago, and was eating crabs and drinking bottles of water that had also drifted from the race. And so I'm thinking I'm going to definitely get sued. This is my first race I put on. And he shows up in Coast Guard, gets out of the helicopter, and says, hey, let's go grab dinner. I'm starving. This is a great guy. So that was the first race we had ever put on, and then I continued, stupidly, I continued to put on races that were that long, and 25 people would show up, 50 people. You can't make those numbers work. I lost an insane amount of money. I was still working in finance, so I could fund it, but it just was not working as a business. In 2010, sitting around the kitchen, to my own reluctance, we said, well, let's shorten the distance of these races that we're putting on. Let's make them 3 miles, 8 miles, 13 miles. Let's make it military inspired so that it's got some fun elements to it. We can still change
and fun.
Yeah, we can still change lives, and I think the confluence of CrossFit, social media, military coming off a couple of wars, right, coming back into different countries, all combined with, we got really lucky with the name Spartan. Really, really lucky with the name Spartan. And I can't even put enough emphasis on that word. I joke with Richard Branson, I say, I think Spartan's much better than Virgin, but he doesn't agree. So.
I can't imagine why. Yeah. So Spartan is now more obstacle, right? There's running for sure.
Spartan is a way of life. Spartan is, you could be into parkour, you could be an ice climber, you could be a runner, a mom. It's just a way of life, it's a mindset, right? And so, so we just happen to generate revenue at races where there's military obstacles, but it's a way of life.
Right. So on those obstacles, I understand you can bypass the obstacle and do burpees, But
well, you can't bypass it.
You can't bypass it?
No, you've got to attempt it.
Okay, right, okay.
You got to attempt it, and then there's a punishment.
Got it. So what is the, I don't even know if you give advice, but how do you give advice to people on overcoming those obstacles, and how is that coming back into their lives? Have you got any stories about?
Yeah, well, so we use this word, these two words, obstacle immunity, which is everything we've been talking about here, right? How do you build obstacle immunity in your life? If you manufacture some adversity, like take cold showers, do the burpees, do the pull-ups, do the runs, or however, you don't want to just bang your head against a brick wall. You want to do something athletic that's got some benefits. And when the real obstacles show up, right, you're like, I could deal with that. The brain is awesome, right? The brain releases all kinds of chemicals when you get through challenges and you succeed, however you define that success. The brain then releases a taste of those same chemicals at the starting line again. So you do an obstacle, you do well at it, releases a bunch of chemicals. You see another obstacle, now you get a little taste of what it's going to feel like when you complete that one. So success breeds success, and not to say that just because somebody did 30 obstacles at a Spartan race, they're going to be better able to, God forbid, deal with cancer. But I get hundreds of emails on a daily basis. I got an email 3 days ago from a woman whose house burned down. She sent me a picture. This is not like, wasn't like a little fire in the kitchen. The house burned down. I couldn't believe it, right? Because the paragraph that she writes, in addition to the photo she sent, is, I'm getting ready to do the New Jersey Beast. I just need some Reebok shoes. They burned in the fire. And so clearly she had obstacles. She wasn't stressed about all the possessions she lost, the fact that she's got to build a new house. Hopefully she had insurance. It was, I'm fine, I'm a Spartan. I got to go get some shoes and get the race done.
Right.
Get them on a daily basis.
That's amazing. So one of the common threads in conversations around heroism and especially the hero's journey is that journey. We talk about leaving the comfortable, mundane world and going on a journey where there's challenges, you meet people, and you come back out the other end as a changed person. And I think it's easy to think of a Spartan race as that journey, but I've heard you talk about how really the journey is beginning at the end of the race. Can you talk a bit about that as well? And
yeah, well, I mean, certainly clicking that sign-up button for the 1 million people a year that's taking the first step on that 1,000-mile journey. But once you get to the finish line, then you've got those goggles on, and you see the world in a whole new way. And you've probably got a lot of help along the way in the race. You probably helped a lot of people, and you struggled, and you suffered, and you came out the other end of it, and you're a transformed person, just like I was in any of the really difficult challenges, or you or anybody in the audience, right? Einstein said, adversity introduces a man or woman to themselves. And so I think through that struggle, you get introduced to yourself. Hopefully you like what you see. and when you come out the other side, you tackle life in a new way. I know I did.
Have you got any stories about someone who has, again, written to you that's maybe changed the way they approach life, or their lives have changed? I mean, obviously
hundreds a day.
Is there any
drug addicts that are no longer taking drugs and now helping people similar to them get off drugs? Alcoholics, husbands and wives getting back together. I had a guy come up to me after a race, and he said, before I did this race, I was really pissed at my wife. I was going to leave her. We were going to get divorced. I got to the finish line, literally walked right up to me, and said, now I'm reflecting, and I think I'm the one that needs to change, and I'm going to go back home and give it a whirl. And so I get them every day. And by the way, it's a very hard job to run any business, especially Spartan, because we're in 30 countries. When you get those emails, you're like re-inspired, right?
Right. So jumping back a bit, where you were talking about Spartan being a life, you've got the Spartan Up book and podcast now, and can you expand on what the goal is there? I mean, it started with the races, and clearly you've seen what this is doing. What's if someone's getting, well, you're all getting the book. That felt like a bit like an Oprah moment, but you guys are all going to get the Spartan Up book when we leave here. But what are they going to get out of that book? What is the idea behind Spartan Up life?
Well, the big thing with the book is once you get out of the cold shower and you're freezing, you use it to start a fire, right? You burn it. But if you like it, if you like it, the idea behind it is all these things we think that help transform lives. Learning how to make a commitment, learning about changing frame of reference, learning how to delay gratification. That's a big one for me. Anybody know the marshmallow test? Have you guys heard of the marshmallow cookie test? I'll tell it quick. Stanford University, 1972, Professor Walter Mischel takes children, puts them in cubicles, offers them a marshmallow or a cookie, tells the children, eat it now, or if you wait, I'll come back and give you 2. Most kids take the marshmallow cookie right away. They followed the children for 30 years, and what they found was 30 years later, the kids that were able to delay gratification, not eat the marshmallow cookie, had a better life, better SAT scores, better marriage, better house, better everything in their life was better, 100% correlation. There are some people debating the merits of the test, the way it was done, but I took my son, he was 6 years old. I learned about this test, and I said, I got to find out if I've got a kid that could delay gratification. And I was really nervous, because what if I get the wrong answer? And so I'm sitting there at dinner, and I said, hey, Jack, do you want some ice cream? And I never give them junk food, so this was already going to be a difficult situation. And I said, you could have a scoop now, and we had a scoop in front of him, or you could wait, and I'll get you 2. 3.5 minutes in, he turns to me, he says, Dad, how long do I have to wait to get 15 scoops? And I thought, think about that, though, and that's our message when you say, what's the book and the methodology and the race and everything we put out there is about getting 15 scoops in life. That doesn't mean becoming a billionaire or anything. It's just getting the most out of life. We're on the planet for a very short time, and that's what the philosophy is about.
I'm glad you brought up the kid. You've got 4 kids?
4 children, yeah.
So what are you doing? And you've hit some of it already, but as a parent, and I know there's a lot of parents in the room, what are you doing to make them successful adults?
You know, none of us were parents before, right? So we get to find out 20 years later if what we did was right or wrong. I'm a maniac, as you probably suspect, and my kids have been training at 5:45 a.m. 7 days a week since they're 4 years old. So I don't know what's going to happen really, but I'm trying to keep them disciplined. I mean, we live well. They're not growing up in that neighborhood where I grew up. They're not in Calcutta, so they're disadvantaged in my opinion. I joke with them that we're moving to Calcutta or Siberia, but and they don't really understand what that means, but they will. So we do the workouts. I make them work really hard in school. I'm probably too strict. I have no idea. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I'm just trying to give them the tools maybe that I didn't have, and I try not to buy them a bunch of stuff, and I made them all start their own little businesses. We watch Shark Tank at night. I don't know. I'm winging it.
Yeah. Aren't we all?
Yeah.
So I think the workout part, are you presenting that to them as healthy living, or are you presenting it to them as this is going to suck and the rest of your day is going to be good? Or is it both?
Well, at 4 years old, it's really not a presentation. It's just get the fuck up.
Get up, get up and do it.
And so we get them up, and they hated it. It was on the farm. We were on the farm in Vermont when this started, and we had this barn that was about 30 yards away from the house. And so if there was any crying or screaming or anything going on in there, my wife didn't hear it. And so we were able to get away with a lot of stuff that social services probably would have arrested me for. And then we got through that. And once we got through that, it just became like brushing their teeth, which is what I was hoping would happen. And so there's resistance, but it's like, this is what we do every day. The benefit they got to see was my son, when he was 8, ran the Boston Marathon. And my other son, when he was 7, ran the New York Marathon. And so they got to tell their friends, not that it's about bragging, but maybe they made that correlation. Okay, I train every day, and these are the benefits I get. Hopefully, I know at mile 21, they did not see a benefit to, right? They were hurting.
Right.
But
how old's your oldest now?
My oldest is now 11.
11.
And now girls are saying, oh, you have muscles, so maybe he's starting to figure out, all right, it paid off.
Worthwhile.
Maybe.
Nice. So how many episodes of Spartan Up podcast have you done now?
We've filmed about 225, 250 of them. We've shown, 160 of them.
Okay. So one of the things I really appreciate about that podcast is the breadth of backgrounds of the people you're interviewing, which is really what I try to do with the Hero Roundtable. Is, we've had philosophers today, we've had athletes, we've had business people, parents, really broad background to bring those different perspectives. Can you talk about why you're doing that? What is the point? Why aren't you just interviewing parkour experts and fitness fanatics? Where is that coming from?
I had 750 customers in the pool business, and I had an entire swath of backgrounds as customers. And I was very young, and those customers let me into their house. I can go in and have dinner. I can sleep over on the couch. I had that kind of relationship with most of my customers. And it was over a 12-year period that it was like a fishbowl almost. I got to look inside how they ran their families. And some were really successful with family, some were successful with money, some went to jail, some got killed. I got to see all that, and like Bruce Lee, I took the good, I discarded the bad, and I realized not everybody had that benefit that I had, seeing all that, especially at a young age. So the idea of the podcast was that same thing. Let's find interesting people that could give us 2 or 3 little tips in life that we could apply to our own life, because Spartan is a mindset. Like I said, it's not just a race. Right.
So who are the people that you've got? Because the other thing I like about the podcast is that you've got this, always there's a group of people discussing the interview.
You're really listening? You're watching the podcast?
Oh, yeah.
I can't get my wife to listen to the podcast, so I'm glad you're listening to them. All right.
So where did that come from, the idea? Because I haven't seen that before. And for the audience, there's although I'm sure you're all watching it. Yeah, there's essentially a panel that introduces the interview, which is always about 20 minutes of you with someone, and then they come back and discuss what they learn. So where did that come from?
I've had a lot of good ideas, but I can't say that they are formed in my own mind. It's like you take a little piece of this, you take a little piece of that, and I was probably standing around the farm, and there were 3 of us there, and we said, this is what we'll do. So, I can't take credit for that, but it's good because then we have a different perspective, right? Johnny has a psychology background. He's got a perspective. Sephra studies plants and trees and ecosystems, and so she's got a wacky perspective on the stuff we're covering. Colonel Nye was ex-military, and so it's just fun to get different perspectives.
Right. Who have been some of the memorable interviews that you've done, or points that you've picked? Something that surprised you, maybe, that you've taken away from some of these interviews?
I can't think of his name. He's from Lebanon. He's a billionaire. He's in LA. And I think I had interviewed 3 billionaires that day or that week. And I said, another billionaire, it's going to be boring, right? And I walk in, and this guy, this story's not, you can't even believe this story. I'm gonna tell you the story. I'm gonna ruin it for you, but this is unbelievable. He grows up in Lebanon. His dad dies at 9 or 10 years old. His uncle takes over the business his dad was running, which was a big construction company, very big construction, thousands of employees. And his uncle is telling him, why are you carrying around books? Books will make you weak. You need to carry bricks. And he's trying to get him into the construction business. But the kid is just a ferocious reader, and he's a smart kid. This is the guy I'm interviewing. Anyway, fast forward, he's 19 years old. He takes over the business from the uncle, and he grows it into even a bigger business. Well, I guess that was around the time there were some issues in that region of the world, and they came in and they kidnapped him. And they hung him upside down for they beat him, they tortured him. It was like 90 hours they had him in captivity. Somehow he negotiates his way out, but he's got to give up everything. Gives up his businesses, his life, his family, everything, and they throw him on an airplane to leave the country. He lands in Geneva, I believe, rushed to the hospital, and in the hospital meets the Shah, somebody connected to the Shah of Iran. She hears the whole story and brings him to Iran, where he rebuilds his life, and he rebuilds his businesses, and he's got a construction company, and it's about half the size of what he had in Lebanon. He is in a hotel one day, and his housekeeper calls and says, "Don't come home. They're in the house." And they're literally lining people up outside and they're shooting them. They're killing them. It's the whole Iran thing. He negotiates his way out of the country on horseback, however he gets out of the country, minimum money, lands in LA, never to go back, ever, to the Middle East. 2 cents in his pocket, starts over, becomes a billionaire in LA. So, I mean, it's hard to, right, we talk about obstacles, it's hard to bounce back from one thing, pretty hard to bounce back from those two.
Yeah.
So, amazing story that I just didn't expect.
Right. Well, I was talking to someone in the audience earlier about these kinds of experiences that really can make someone very successful or driven, but also be more likely to take a heroic action, to having that compassion. But you don't want to force that on anybody. You know, you wouldn't wish that experience on anybody.
No.
But it's clearly, there's something there, right, that these things are shaping people.
Well, you know, Michael Phelps' coach, right? I don't know if you heard this, but Michael Phelps' coach used to purposely screw up his airline tickets, break his goggles, forget to put his shorts in the bag. He did it on purpose, right, to prepare him for adversity. So
right.
That's that idea of manufacturing adversity.
Yeah. So for the audience who were looking at you doing burpees earlier and shuddering, what are some first steps that people can take to get into this life? Because when I
you got to make it. It's got to be non-negotiable.
Okay.
Right, and so I did not want to do burpees out in the hallway, but it's a non-negotiable commitment I made with myself that health comes first. You know, they say, look, a healthy person will have 1,000,000 wishes, an unhealthy person has 1 wish, right? And so I don't want to be unhealthy if I could control that. I try my best, like we all do, to eat healthy. I try my best to only drink water. I drink my green juice. I do all the things. You got to exercise. You got to sweat. You got to get blood flow. So I didn't work out this morning. And so I had to get, it's non-negotiable. I had to do it. And so if you make that commitment, if you're like me, you could just make that commitment to yourself.
Right.
But I'm a maniac. If you're not like me, you just make the commitment publicly. You tell people around you, I'm going to do this every day. It's non-negotiable. And then when you don't do it, you're embarrassed, hopefully, enough that it forces you to do it. Because most people are just not self-motivated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. I was like, that's a very important piece, right?
Yeah. So you might have to just scream it out from the rooftops and say, "This is what I'm doing." So that you're embarrassed if you don't do it.
Yeah, I've heard Tim Ferriss suggest that you make financial wagers against doing these things as well, and the public
That'll do it.
announcement. Yeah. Have you seen any specifically successful ways of making it public? Is it just telling your wife, or is it putting it on Facebook?
What I used to do with it, I was so annoyed with people. One of our races we used to put on was called the Death Race. I'm probably going to bring it back, but the Death Race, when they would come, I got so frustrated with participants because they would quit. And for me, I was losing money on the event, and I was taking 80 hours of my life to shepherd these people through this torture, and then they would quit on me. And so I said, you know what? No one's allowed to race anymore unless they get an article printed in the newspaper that says they're going to do this and complete it. People stop quitting because they don't want to go home, right, and tell all their neighbors and everybody.
Right.
Yeah, it became harder for me to get them to quit. So it was interesting.
How many Spartan races do you have in the UK?
I think there's 6 in the UK. Okay. It's 200 globally.
And what kind of preparation, let's say there's an average unfit Australian, 44 years old, if they wanted to do a Spartan race, what would you suggest they start doing now?
First of all, anybody could get out there. I had a 696-pound guy come out and do it. Now, it took him 7 hours to do 3 miles, but anybody could get out there and do it. If you want to win the thing or you want to perform well, you've got to run. I suggest Bikram yoga to everybody because the one thing that's going to stop you from finishing a Spartan race is injury. And I personally believe, from all those years of watching my mother teach yoga in the living room, that there's nothing like yoga, mobility, stretching. So I love Bikram yoga. And then you got to do pull-ups and burpees as a minimum.
Right. I wanted to ask you about the Bikram yoga. Tell me more about that. What makes it different to yoga?
26 postures. It's 100+ degrees in the room, so you're automatically loosened up. You're sweating. It's outside of burpees. It's the only exercise I do where you're just like, get me the F out of here, right? It's equivalent to a cold shower or burpees.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. I think it sounds great already. I think.
By the way, you come out of Bikram feeling like a brand new person.
Right.
Brand new, like you just came out of your mother's womb. Brand new. Off the shelf.
Very good. Joe, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.